It was late May 1940, and the world seemed to have turned upside down. Across northern France, the roar of bombs and the crackle of gunfire filled the air. The city of Dunkirk had become a place of fear and chaos. Among the thousands of soldiers trapped on the beaches was a young British officer named Thomas Harper. He was 24 years old, brave but tired and far from home. Thomas had joined the army the previous year, full of hope and energy. He had imagined adventure, camaraderie, and the pride of serving his country. Now he stood in wet sand, staring at the endless waves of the English Channel. The German army had advanced quickly, pushing the Allies back. Retreat had been unavoidable, and Thomas's unit had been forced to fall back to Dunkirk. Ships were few, and every moment felt urgent. The situation seemed hopeless. The first day at Dunkirk was terrifying. Thomas and his men tried to stay calm as shells exploded nearby. Each sound of a bomb made hearts race faster. Soldiers were exhausted from walking for days, and food and water were almost gone. Thomas kept thinking about his family back in London. He wished he could send them a message, a sign that he was still alive. But communication was impossible. The beach was crowded with thousands of men, all waiting for rescue. Some soldiers sat silently, staring at the horizon. Others whispered prayers or tried to comfort those around them. The noise was constant. Explosions, shouting, the cries of the wounded. Thomas moved carefully, trying to avoid fallen soldiers and debris. He kept telling himself that panic would not help anyone. His training, his experience, and his hope were all he had. On the second day, Thomas and a small group of soldiers decided to move closer to the docks. They hoped to board one of the few ships that might take them home. The beach was chaotic, but they pressed forward, stepping over sandbags and bodies, helping where they could. Some soldiers carried the wounded. Others tried to organize the waiting crowd. Every movement was a struggle, but every movement was also necessary. Thomas noticed an old fisherman nearby. His small boats looked fragile compared to the large warships, but he was ready to help. Thomas approached him carefully, trying to appear calm. "Sir, are you taking soldiers back to England?" Thomas asked. The fisherman nodded, his face calm but determined. "Yes, young man, I've done it before. It's dangerous, but I will try." Thomas hesitated. Could a small boat really cross the channel under such conditions? But he also knew there were no other options. The fear of waiting and doing nothing was worse than the fear of trying. He helped his friends climb into the boat. The boat creaked under their weight, and Thomas prayed silently that it would hold. The journey began slowly. The boat rocked with every wave. Thomas held tightly to the side, trying to keep his balance. Around them, other small boats carried soldiers too. It was a strange and terrifying sight. Hundreds of tiny vessels moving through the sea, all carrying hope and desperation. The English coast seemed impossibly far. Every wave felt taller, every splash of water colder than the last. Suddenly, the sound of German planes filled the sky. Bombs fell nearby, and the water seemed to tremble with each explosion. Thomas ducked instinctively, his heart racing. One shell landed close, splashing water onto the deck, soaking him completely. Other soldiers screamed, and some boats turned back, but the fisherman steered steadily, never losing control. He shouted instructions, calm but firm, helping everyone stay seated and balanced. Hours passed, and the situation grew worse. Thomas could see the English coast in the distance, but it felt far away. The soldiers around him were tired, hungry, and frightened. Some had lost friends, some had seen horrors they could never forget. Thomas thought about his younger sister, Clara, and his parents, and the wave of guilt mixed with fear. He wondered if he would ever see them again. Yet he also saw courage everywhere, soldiers helping each other, strangers risking everything to save lives, and ordinary citizens volunteering to cross the channel in small boats. Night fell, and the cold sea seemed endless. Thomas wrapped his arms around himself, trying to fight off the chill. The fisherman hummed an old tune, quiet but persistent, and somehow it gave Thomas a sense of calm. Around them, the other boats moved slowly, lights flickering in the darkness. Every moment was dangerous, but Thomas realized that each second brought them closer to safety. The next morning, after what seemed like an eternity, Thomas's boat reached England. Relief flooded through him. Soldiers hugged each other, some weeping openly. Thomas felt a mixture of joy and sorrow. He had survived, but so many of his friends had not. Still, he knew that reaching England meant another chance to fight, another chance to protect the people he loved. In the following weeks, Thomas heard the full story of Dunkirk. Over 300,000 soldiers had been evacuated, not by the army alone, but by ordinary people using fishing boats, yachts, and even small pleasure crafts. Every type of boat had been used. Families, friends, and strangers had risked their lives to help. It was a miracle, a story of courage and determination that would be remembered forever. Thomas returned to his unit, stronger and wiser. He knew the war was far from over, but the experience had taught him a powerful lesson. Even in the face of fear and danger, hope could survive. Courage, kindness, and determination could shine even in the darkest times. And in Dunkirk, hope had indeed survived, carried across the waters by brave hands and determined hearts. As Thomas stood on the shores of England, watching the sun rise over the channel, he whispered to himself, "We were not defeated, not today, not ever." The miracle had not only saved thousands of soldiers, it had also renewed faith in humanity. Ordinary people had achieved something extraordinary, proving that even the smallest actions could change the course of history. Thomas often thought back to that time on the beaches of Dunkirk. He remembered the terrified soldiers, the courageous fishermen, and the endless waves. He remembered the fear and the hope intertwined in every moment. Most of all, he remembered the lesson. Even when everything seems lost, determination and bravery can create miracles. And in that moment, on that long beach under a dark sky, he had witnessed one of the greatest miracles of the war. Years later, Thomas would tell his children about Dunkirk. He would speak of fear and courage, of despair and hope. He would tell them about the men who never gave up, the people who crossed the channel in fragile boats, and the unbreakable human spirit. He wanted them to understand that history is not just made by generals or politicians. It is made by ordinary people who choose to act when the world seems impossible. Thomas Harper never forgot Dunkirk. He never forgot the sound of the waves, the cries of the soldiers, and the determined faces of those who risked everything. The Miracle of Dunkirk was more than a story of survival. It was a story of courage, determination, and hope. It was proof that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit could shine brighter than any shadow of fear. And as Thomas walked along the peaceful shores years later, he smiled softly, knowing that the courage of Dunkirk lived on in every act of bravery, kindness, and hope. The end.